So when we went to park and we go to get out of the vehicle, they flooded the street then. Everyone pulled up, guns out, but we got out and started running. Now, the other two people that I was with, those were the main people that they were after. So the cops kind of put the focal point on them. And right as I was running up the steps of the front porch of the house, my friend's mother was like opening the door at the same time to come outside. So as soon as she opened the door, I actually just blazed right past her into the house to try and get out of the back door. But by the time I got back there to try and open it, I had already saw a unit back there with a dog.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Evolving Prisons with me, Kagan Carey. Before we get started, I'd be really grateful if you would please subscribe to this channel so that you get updates every time an episode is released. Today, I talk with Joshua Holi. Joshua went to prison in America for shooting his sister's ex-boyfriend. It's a very powerful episode where we talk about what was going on for Joshua at the time before he went to prison and before he shot his sister's ex-boyfriend. We talk about the fact that he was on the run for 13 months and eventually caught and sentenced to time in prison. We talk about the difficulty of being in prison and also how prison actually transformed his life. We also talk about Joshua being released from prison and the impact that it's had on him having a conviction for attempted murder back out in society. I really hope you enjoy this episode. So Joshua, thank you so much for joining me. The reason I wanted to have you on the podcast was because I actually saw you sharing your story on another podcast. And I was really drawn to you because you were talking about the fact that you went to prison for shooting somebody, but you have such a warm energy about you and just such a lovely personality that I thought it was important to bring you on to show people that just because you've been to prison doesn't mean you're a bad person. So you're a great person to have on the show. But I want to talk about what actually brought you to that point in time. Because you said that you were a really quiet young person and quite studious, but that your first involvement in crime was actually smashing a window and getting a fine. So tell us about what was going on for you that led to that first incident.
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate you having me, and it's an honor to be here and to be able to tell my story and share some of my life with other people. But yeah, I mean, to get into that situation, it was just a very simple mischief night type thing. I had a small group of friends, and we had a tight camaraderie. And we used to tell our parents things like, oh, we're all going to sleep over at someone's house tonight. And we would one of us had a car, so we would go out and just drive, hang out, get into normal mischief. And we had passed one of our rival schools, and there was a greenhouse there. We were messing around in the parking lot, and we started breaking some windows in this greenhouse that they do like gardening in. And for some class, and that's what kind of was the precursor to everything, to me entering crime, unfortunately.
That's the thing, it was such a minor thing that you did, and then you got a $700 fine. And am I right in saying that you decided to sell drugs in order to be able to pay that fine?
Correct, yes. I didn't have any other way to pay it, but I had years to pay this fine, so it was only really like $20 a month. So it wasn't anything that I couldn't turn up or that my mother didn't think I could reasonably find a way to pay.
And what made you decide then to turn to selling drugs in order to pay it?
I think it was just something that I was seeing going on around me, and I saw how fast people were getting the money. And I just thought, look, I'm not a drug dealer, but I know a ton of people that do it in my school at the time. So I just thought I can just make enough to pay this fine off and be done, and then I don't have to worry about this issue again because I'm not involved in any type of activity like that. I kind of had learned my lesson, I felt like, at the moment.
And how did your mum think you were paying the fine back?
She knew I was just, buying and reselling some things, whether it be sneakers or things in school, candy and stuff like that. It was really easy, and I was just kind of making the minimum payment on the fine as far as she knew. So it was easy for me to just hide what was happening.
And how quickly did you actually pay off the fine?
I think it was only in a couple weeks. I had turned up enough, and that kind of brought me right back to the allure of, then I started looking at other things and seeing, okay, well, maybe I can sell a little bit more just to make some extra money, to have some extra cash. And then it just turned into a full-time job for me.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's the problem with drugs, isn't it? That it can seem like quick, easy money for people. So tell me about what happened then. So you continued to sell the drugs, and I know that you were shot when you were young. So what happened there?
Yeah, so I wasn't shot. I was shot at. Thankfully, I wasn't hit. But yeah, the first time happened when I was 16. We were selling drugs in basically a group. It was almost like we had a team. And one of the guys had gotten into some pretty serious situation where he was robbed. So a group of us went and retaliated against the guy that had robbed him. We beat him up pretty bad. He was an older guy. He was in his 30s, and I was 16 at the time, and he saw me at a convenience store. So we kind of got into this verbal altercation outside of the convenience store. And as him and his friend were jumping in the car and going to pull off, he came out the window and started shooting at me. So I was basically running down an alley as he was firing. I think he fired maybe 3 or 4 shots, and I was, just first time I had ever been in a situation like that. So at the moment I was just running and ducking, but it didn't really hit me until after, once I made it back to my house and kind of got in my house, shut the door, no one was around, and it started hitting me, wow, somebody just tried to take my life. And that made me think, okay, I think if I'm going to remain in this game and in this lifestyle, that I definitely need to consider carrying a weapon of my own. And it was kind of like a thing that I knew I had to take things a bit to the next level to continue to participate.
And what was the allure in continuing to participate rather than getting out of that life?
I think honestly, in retrospect, it gave me a sense of purpose. I didn't really have much of a plan as a kid. I grew up without a father, so I didn't have that tight bond with someone where I felt like I belonged. So selling drugs and having the money gave me a particular status. People looked at me a certain kind of way, and I think that I enjoyed that feeling. And then I thought, look, I could make a ton of money this way. I didn't have a plan with what I would do with that money once I got it, but I was just kind of in that first phase of, my family's poor. I think there's a way out by doing this.
And I know that by the time you were 18, you were obviously making a lot of money because you'd said that you were wearing bracelets worth $12,000, for example. And going back to what I said before, I think that would entice some people who maybe don't have much to think, oh, I could do that. So what would you say to people to deter them from following your path?
I would say look a little further down the road. And I think that's all. The only thing I was looking at was the first part was the money and the allure of the fun and, being feared in a way by certain people. But I think if you look a bit further down the road, you'll see that it's quite empty. There's, how many successful drug dealers do you know? It's not really a long-term thing to do, and it's extremely dangerous. I mean, a lot of my friends ended up, being killed just in the street alone that weren't bad people. And I would say it's very easy to go down that road, but very, very hard to get out once you do get started, because it is a lifestyle that will consume you quite quick.
Thank you for that. And I know then that in 2006 was when the incident happened where you shot somebody. How long after your 18th and what was going on for you at that time did that happen? Was 2006 quite quickly after that, or was it quite a while away?
Yeah, it was only a few years later. So I had just turned 21, so it was maybe 3 years after I was pretty deep into selling drugs, 3-4 years. And it happened right after I turned 21. So yeah, quite quick, I would say, in terms of the crime and everything. And by then I had already been more comfortable in terms of getting into those situations. There had been several shootouts there where thankfully I wasn't hit, and the people that we were against weren't either. So this was the next major incident for me, I'd say.
Okay. And the person that you shot was your sister's ex-boyfriend.
Yes.
Are you able just to tell us a little bit about what was going on and the incident itself at the time?
Yeah, they were together for a number of years. We actually lived together for some time. I had a lot of like basically a family bond with him, but their relationship started going south, and she started going, talking to me about the things that she was going through, and slowly but surely that seeing her over and over in this kind of pain started to really build this anger and this hate really between he and I. Now, I had went to California for 13 months or so to meet my father, to stay with him. So I was kind of separated from her, and basically all I was doing while I was over there was hearing incident after incident and problem after problem between them. So I kind of just made it a staple in my mind. Like, the next time I see him, it's probably going to be a pretty big issue. Didn't have it planned to that extent, but it escalated to that night.
And what were the circumstances surrounding that night? What actually happened?
So it was Christmas Eve of '06, and I wasn't living with my family at the time, but I showed up at the house, to celebrate the holiday. My sister was crying, and she had said she was getting in the car to go and talk to some other girl, I guess, that, he was with at the time. They were already separated at this time. So I jumped in the car with her to go. As far as I knew, that she was just going to meet up with her, but and I didn't know where we were going. And we ended up going right to his house. He wasn't home at the time, so they had started their conversation, and it just so happened that he had pulled up, and that's when then everything started going crazy. Verbal altercations. His cousin and his cousin's friend came outside, and that's when things escalated. And I thought, okay, it's time to get out of here. But when we went to leave, he ran up alongside the car and hit the glass, and she had kind of let go of the wheel at that point and screamed. So at that moment, I knew, something's happening here. I think I need to make some serious decision in a split second, and that's what I chose to do, to get out and start firing.
And did you intentionally take the gun with you, or was that, as you say, was that just your life where you just kept a weapon on you at all times?
Yeah, by then it was default. So I always had it. I had been carrying it for years. Right after that incident happened when I was 16, it just became a basic, normal thing for me. And I just felt at that moment, look, something is about to happen here. There was a number of verbal things said that, they were going to do. So I didn't want to take the risk of allowing that to happen, knowing that my sister could lose her life. I didn't really care about mine at the moment, I would say, but yeah.
And so when you shot him, was it just once that you shot him?
Twice. So I fired 2 shots at him, and both hit him in the arm and the leg. I couldn't tell at the time where he was hit because it was dark outside, and I knew there was 2 other people there. So I kind of paced out a bit into the middle of the street, fired 1 shot in that direction because I didn't know by then if those guys had weapons. So off the 3rd shot, then I just started running back to the car. My sister was going, she was still screaming. She actually wasn't able to make it out of the vehicle or anything, and I just pushed myself into the car and told her, drive off. There's a ton of commotion going on at the time. My ears were still ringing, so it's quite disorienting. But the arguing that had already happened prior to it happening had escalated enough that people had already called the police. So by the time we were pulling off of the street, we could already see cops were on the way.
And did you know how hurt he was at the time when you left?
No. So we ended up pulling off about 1.5 miles down the road. I told her to just let me out. I had recognized a friend's house that I knew I could just go to randomly, and I jumped out of the car there, didn't tell her what I was doing, and just told her, look, you're probably never going to see me again, because I knew I would have to address the situation. For all I knew at the time, he was dead. So I just kissed her, gave her a hug. She was crying, hysterical, and I just told her, I have to go, you have to go. And that was the last time I saw her for over a year.
Okay. And was it the next day then, on Christmas Day, that you saw that you were wanted by the police on television?
Yeah. So I called one of my close friends, and I had just told him, look, I have an emergency. He came and picked me up. I went to his place, and it was only a few hours before we heard where he was hit. People talk, word gets back, and I just knew at that moment, look, I can't tell anyone where I am, what I'm doing. And my next concern was, is he going to say anything to the police? Like, is anyone going to, basically tell and say that I was the one that did it? So I just kind of had to sit patient for that. But waking up Christmas Day, I was checking the news, and, the first news that came on, they had my picture already up there and said I was wanted for an attempted murder. So I knew then, okay, this is over.
How did you feel seeing that?
Yeah, overwhelming, very strange feeling to just watch your face on the news, and immediately that story goes out onto the internet. There's a laundry list of people commenting and saying pretty hateful things, which is totally understandable. But yeah, a feeling I knew I had to accept and be responsible for. My whole concern was, what am I going to do now before I go in? How much time am I facing? Things like that. I was very ignorant to the law at the time.
And that was something I was going to ask you, because prison, one of its purposes is deterrent, to stop people committing crimes so they don't go to prison. But I'm very aware that if something isn't premeditated or somebody isn't in the right frame of mind, they might not consider the consequences of their actions. So for you, at any point in your time of drug dealing or this shooting, did you ever think about the fact you might go to prison?
Absolutely. I think I was very aware of that, and I kind of thought it was an inevitable thing. But part of me held on to the fact that I was more of a studious person and more of a nerd when I was growing up. I kind of had felt like I had this edge, and I was doing things a bit more intelligent. So part of me felt, look, I'm not going to get caught doing this. If I do, it's going to be a minimal thing. Everyone does have to do some sort of jail time. I didn't think I would have to go away for a long time, because most of the time I didn't keep much things on me. The gun was really the worst thing. And I thought, I would do a little bit of time, get out, no problem. I have money saved, life goes on. But I was very ignorant to the severity of some of the crimes that I was committing. And once I found out what kind of sentences that carried, that's when I realized, okay, I definitely need a plan before I decide to go in there.
So after the Christmas Day incident, I know that you went on the run for a while, and you said there that you were becoming aware of what kind of time you were facing. At that point, how long did you think you were facing in prison before you went on the run?
Well, the lawyer that I contacted told me if I went to trial and I got found guilty, that it would carry a 20 to 40 year sentence. So to me, that was life. I was a young kid, and I knew, that's my entire life in my opinion. And I didn't count on getting out after the 20th year. By then I would be so institutionalized, as how I envisioned it. I knew there was an opportunity for me to get something like 7 years or maybe a bit less. So even then, it sounded like a ton of time to me. And that's when I thought, okay, I can't turn myself in yet. Let me consider some options. But plan A for now would be just make enough money that I can just keep saving and put away. God forbid something happens. At least I have something when I come home, because who knows where my friends or my family are going to be by the time, I get out of there. So I did knew it was inevitable. I just wanted to be prepared and not come home to nothing.
So you went on the run then, and how were you intending, or how did you plan to make money while you were on the run?
So I did have a connection in Philadelphia for fake IDs, and this was in 2006. So things were a little bit more, I'd say a little bit more loose in terms of, being able to just show someone an ID and get some work done. I figured I could go far enough away somewhere in the U.S. I had connections in Texas on the West Coast, and I thought I could take the bus over there because I knew I couldn't fly. And I thought I could just settle down, live quiet, work under the table, and just be a normal person. And it was a life I actually craved in a way, because, years and years of just looking over my shoulder and being paranoid all the time, thinking people wanted to, steal from me or rob me or a lot of fake people come around you in that lifestyle. So I kind of thought this would be a good thing for me to just get away and just work and just work a 9 to 5. That all of a sudden looked like a beautiful life.
But am I right in saying that that wasn't the reality and that you actually ended up spending a lot of time in your house scared to leave?
Yeah, absolutely. The first couple months, I couldn't even leave my town. And unfortunately, like I said, that negativity had consumed me by then. So there was a lot of threats of retaliation. So, part of me wanted to just stay around and continue the war with people because I had thought, look, I'm already this deep in, so I might as well go all out. Whoever wants a problem, I'm totally open to that. And I was angry and I was upset. So yeah, once I did get out of there, even then it was kind of difficult to relax in a way. I was always afraid no matter where I went that something was going to happen. The smallest amount of police contact could, put me away for a really long time. So I was very paranoid at that over those next 13 months.
And did you also have a bulletproof vest that you would carry and wear? Is that right?
Yeah, when I was home, I was wearing that all the time because I just never knew who I could run into. I tried to really just move around late at night if I ever needed to do anything. I really only trusted a few people who were going out of their way to help me out, move some things for me or go and pick up some money for me. And, I was still continuing to sell drugs then, but through them, more of like giving them things on consignment or just loaning them money and having them pay me more back, etc. So wherever I could fish up some sort of money. But yeah, I was inside for the majority of that year and change.
And when I heard that, it made me think, if that's the way you're living your life, would you not just be better handing yourself in, doing your sentence, because it might not actually be much different? But what was going on for you? Did that thought cross your mind at all?
It did, yeah. There was plenty of times where I thought, look, I should just give up and go. But the fact that I had never been in trouble before to that extent outside of that fine, I didn't know what I was walking into. I knew I was going upstate, which I knew, you're going up there with people who have killed people, who are doing life, who have nothing to lose. And I just thought this was going to be a whole other battle. And the level of uncertainty was enough to keep me away until they caught me.
Yeah, I can get that because the thought of prison is terrifying to me. But I also found it interesting that while you were on the run, you got a police scanner. And I didn't actually know what that was, but I understand that it can tap into the radio frequency of police radios. And how did you get that? What made you think about getting that?
Yeah, well, I knew some people. I actually remember when I was a kid, there was an elderly guy who lived on our block who had one, and he was just, neighborhood watch, and he basically explained to us, look, it's no different than picking up a radio station. You can tune in, there's a dispatch, you can hear. So sometimes if there's some sort of crime happening in the town, he hears it first, and that's something that a lot of us in the street were aware of. So me being on the run, I knew, look, maybe this can help me, because if I am somewhere and they find out that I'm there, or someone makes some phone call, maybe I can catch the dispatch and hear them saying, look, we're going to this address, which it did end up happening one time when I was in one of our like low income housing neighborhoods in the town within the first couple months, and directly said my name and everything, and I was able to get out of there before they got there, thankfully. But yeah, I kept that pretty close at all times.
I can imagine you must have felt quite anxious and on edge all the time, just almost listening, waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, it was almost like it was always playing in the background. Even it got to the point where I think I could almost hear it when I didn't have it on. Like, it just sounded so normal to me, and I would just listen for certain keywords of, whether it would be the area I was in or anything. So I just kind of put that filter on and just let it play as often as I could.
And so you were on the run for 13 months. How did you eventually get caught?
Well, I had went down to Texas for some time. I had went over to California for some time, and then I got to the point where it was hard for me to escape that lifestyle. So like I had said, even even while I was on the run, I was still selling drugs. I started doing the same thing in California, which unfortunately only led me into more trouble. So I started getting into more fights and things out there, more problems, and then I started understanding, look, now I can't even stay here. So it got to the point where I'd said, okay, I'm going to go home. Let me go and take the money that I have, try and offer him some sort of incentive to not go to court, because by then I was privy to the fact that if we could make it to the preliminary hearing and he would refuse to get up on that stand for the charges to bind over, that I could actually walk. So that was my next goal, either that or do something to him again to instill enough in him that he wouldn't say anything. And so bringing me back, I got back and I was hanging out with some friends, and it turned out one of them was in trouble. The police came for them, and I just happened to be there. And that was a pretty crazy situation as well.
Wow. Wow. So the police came, and what did they think when they saw you then? Because obviously there was a hunt looking for you. I imagine it was top of their to-do list was to find you, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. So when they went to pick this guy up, we were all at his house, and it was three of us. So we jumped in the car to go to another house down the street. And by then they had already knew, okay, this guy's in that car. They still had no idea that I was in there. So when we went to park and we go to get out of the vehicle, they flooded the street then. Everyone pulled up, guns out. But we got out and started running. Now, the other two people that I was with, those were the main people that they were after. So the cops kind of put the focal point on them. And right as I was running up the steps of the front porch of the house, my friend's mother was like opening the door at the same time to come outside. So as soon as she opened the door, I actually just blazed right past her into the house to try and get out of the back door. But by the time I got back there to try and open it, I'd already saw a unit back there with a dog. So I had some drugs on me then and a .40 caliber weapon. So I flushed the drugs down the toilet, ran upstairs to the bathroom, and started taking the gun apart, because I thought, if maybe it would just be less of a problem for me if I had a gun in pieces rather than have one loaded. And so I threw it under some towels and I just hid in the bathroom, and eventually they came in the house and were like, look, we're not leaving. We're searching the whole place. And by then I thought, okay, it's over. So I took off my jacket and went downstairs, and I tried to act like I was just somebody in the house waking up, rubbing my eyes like, hey, what's going on? And they were comfortable at the moment, like, sir, just come down here. We have a body warrant for, this person. And one of the officers recognized me and yelled, that's Joshua Holi, and everyone just like started going crazy. Everyone put their guns out on me, and I knew what time it was. So I just did the classic, I turned around, got on my knees, interlaced my fingers behind my head, and I knew it was over.
How did you feel? Because even listening to that story with the dogs in the back, and it turns my stomach. It absolutely terrifies me. How did you feel?
Yeah, I was very afraid at that moment, because I just, while I was standing in that bathroom, I was kind of like standing at the sink, looking in the mirror. I threw a little bit of water on my face, like, look, you have to, like, I knew I could die at that moment if I had went downstairs and did something crazy. So I just thought, maybe they're not going to be so wild with it. I just need to get down, have my hands where they need to be. And I just knew it. It was almost a relief, honestly, because I had been running for so long. I had been waiting for this moment for so long, and I knew that it was going to culminate at some point. So it was bittersweet, I would say. I was happy to not be running anymore, but also, terrified at the road that was ahead for me.
And how long did you end up getting sentenced to for attempted murder?
So I got a 5 to 10, which was the mandatory minimum. There was no way I could get any less than that in Pennsylvania. If you commit a felony with a firearm, that's your minimum. I did get offered initially a 10 to 20 and then a 7 to 14 as a plea. But my lawyer advised and said, look, this is your first time ever doing anything. I think we can get you the minimum. And thank God that's what ended up happening. So I did 5 years even upstate.
Okay. And How did you feel at that point? Because I know that the victim's mum came to your trial. How did you feel? At that point, did it sink in what had happened?
Yeah, for sure. While I was awaiting sentencing, I think it took about 14 months before I had got the sentence. So everything to me, I just accepted and understood. You know, if obviously I knew she was upset, and I totally understood that. I didn't harbor any bad feeling for any of them. I mean, you know, I did something terrible to her son, so naturally, I'd expect her to stand and try and, you know, make her case and make things worse for me. So I kind of let everything go in one ear and out the other. I was still quite hardened at the time when I was going in. I can't even remember anything that was said there during that sentencing on their side. So I just apologized to her and you know, told her it's not anything that I really wanted to do, but I accepted responsibility and knew I was going to have heat for it.
And I understand that your first while in prison was hell, you said. So talk to me about that. What was it that you found particularly challenging?
I think it's just a culmination of a lot of things, especially it being my first time, knowing, look, you're not going home anytime soon. You know, by my standard, that was a lot of time. So I think it was just you know, knowing that I had nothing to do. I had to come up with routines. You know, there's a ton of negativity in there. Everyone is, you know, stressed, complaining. If they're not crying, they're fighting. You know, people are getting hurt. So you're just in this atmosphere of violence and negativity, and it's really hard to ward that off. And then you have, you know, small things like no one's writing you or no one's showing up to your visits, and all of those things just stack on top of each other and start to build this, you know, resentment and anger and frustration. And, you know, no matter how frustrated you get, you're not going anywhere anytime soon, and there's nothing you could do to get out earlier. So it was just a process of adaptation, I'd say.
And how was it with, as you said, there were people in there for life who really had nothing to lose. Did you notice them acting criminally and doing things that were putting people at risk because they had nothing to lose?
Yeah, both sides. So once I got upstate, there were certain people that had life that were still quite early in their sentence and, you know, wild. I mean, the first day one thing I'll never forget, the very first day that I got upstate and I went out in the yard, as we were coming in, there was a big incident where people were fighting, stabbing each other. And I just remember when I was coming in, there was some kid, he looked 18, like he had to be charged as like a young adult. And the sergeant had asked him for his prison ID because he was making some sort of comment as he was passing through the gate. And the kid said, "Oh, do you want my ID?" And he like threw it up in the air. And when the sergeant looked up to just naturally watch the ID, the kid hit him and tried to knock him out. And it was just like, oh man, like my first day here, this guy's trying to knock out the sergeant. And yeah, I knew the lifers had nothing to lose. But on the flip side of that, I did meet a ton of them that were, you know, calm, educated, deep into their sentence, and they were more focused on helping people who were coming in to instill the right things in them so they wouldn't return. So there was a lot that were doing, you know, what I call God's work in there.
I know that your life really transformed and you transformed your mindset in prison. And I think people who do that deserve a lot of credit because it does sound like such a negative environment. There's so much trauma and harm. It's not really the best breeding ground to grow from or change your life. So it is incredible that you managed to do that. And what kind of things were happening in prison that really did help you turn your life around?
For me, I just dove into myself. So I kind of reverted back to that studious kid again. I just went to the library as often as I could. I spent any money that I made working on books and just started reading anything and everything that I could. I was big on, you know, history, self-development, mindset books, business books, and different biographies on different individuals. And started to kind of cultivate my relationship with God. So I grew up a Catholic, but, you know, that I got to the age where I started realizing, look, am I who I really am, or am I just a product of the information that my parents have fed to me? So I kind of decided to take a journey on my own. I looked at other religions, just read about them, didn't participate in anything, but I kind of went on that walk on my own, and it did bring me back to Christianity after some time. So yeah, I found comfort in the Bible, comfort to going to church and listening to good words, because it felt so rare to hear them in that environment, and I kind of craved that. And worked on myself physically, and I think that's what started building that discipline in me and those qualities to understand, I'm definitely capable of more than just being a person that's sitting here, ineffective to the world. I felt like I still had a lot to give.
And that's the thing, it's so powerful that you're saying about physically that gave you discipline. I firmly believe you can't upgrade one area of your life without upgrading the others, because I truly believe that how you do anything is how you do everything. So the fact that you were taking that from your physical exercise, putting that into your mindset, just discipline around your life, it's clearly added up over time for you to be able to transform your life. And I know that you then taught GED maths in prison. What did that teach you about yourself and other people?
Yeah, that was a big thing for me. So I took that job on a whim, just as something to do, and I ended up building a good relationship with the instructor. He was a really nice guy, taught me a lot, and I just figured in the beginning when I was trying to help people learn, there was just a very frustrating process, but over time I would end up seeing these small moments in these people who, were normally talking bad, doing the wrong things all day, talking negative, but then I'd see them in the yard one day, maybe they'd come jogging out to me with this smile and say, hey, I passed the test today, I got my GED. And, I would give them a handshake and a hug and, tell them congratulations. And just those small moments, seeing that light in people still kind of gave me that faith, look, there is still good in this person, and he just needs it brought out of him. He needs to be around the right people, have some guidance. And it was things like that made me understand, okay, not all is said and done for everyone here. One mistake is the reason why a lot of people are there, and it's kind of unfair to say I can define this person fully off of just one choice that they made at some particular time.
Yeah, and that is so important. And it's one of the reasons I do the podcast is, as you say, people can make mistakes. And I feel like as a society, we're kind of raised to believe that people who go to prison are bad people, but it could not be further from the truth. There are so many great people who have just been misguided, or something's gone wrong that has kind of then led to all of that happening. And when you came out of prison then, how did it feel? Was it a difficult transition, leaving prison and coming back to society?
Yeah, I think I adjusted pretty well. I was a bit weirded out by the way the culture was. I felt like there was a big change in the dynamic of how people just acted. I felt like the culture was way more sexualized than it was when I was around. The clothing was very different. Everyone was wearing fitted clothing, so that kind of looked strange to me. It just was like, why is everybody wearing tight clothes now? But other than that, I thank God, I had a family that supported me. I had a circle of friends who were not involved in crime. The same ones I broke the windows with. That was the last time they ever got in trouble, except me. But yeah, they were very supportive of me, took me under the wing in terms of just being there and talking the right things into me. I was attending church with them, and, one of my friends was a professional fighter, so I was able to go to those gyms and get around those guys in boxing. And that was a big piece for me, because boxing was somewhere where I could still be strong and be, tough in a sense, but not in trouble. And I wanted to be like those guys once I got around them, because I knew they were, mentally strong individuals, and they weren't about, committing any type of crime.
And the people that you'd associated with before prison, was it difficult to break away from them, or had you been able to do that because you'd been in prison for a number of years?
That part was very surprising to me, honestly. So during the time that I was down, I knew that was going to be a big factor. You hear that so often, you get around those people again and they're all trying to pull you back in. And I can't really say what it was. Maybe it was the severity of the crime I did, and people maybe were afraid in a way. But when I came home, most of the people that I had encountered that had that lifestyle, that still were in that life, they were completely respectful of, I'd see them and they would say, look, we're happy that you came home, you're doing the right thing. But it was kind of like, we never spoke about it, but in a way they knew, like we wouldn't exchange numbers. It was almost like unwritten. They would just say, look, it was great to see you, we got love for you, but, we're doing this. So see you when I see you type thing. I didn't really have any problem with that, thank God.
Wow, that is amazing because it's practically unheard of. So that is fantastic that happened for you. And I know then that a while later you actually met the person that you shot in a gas station. How soon after leaving prison did that happen?
I think about a year, 2014 or something along that line, late 2013. I came home in late January of 2013. So I would say within the first year that happened, yeah.
And how did you feel? What happened that day? What led you to talk to him, and how did it make you feel?
Yeah, so when I went into the gas station, we have this computer there that we can buy sandwiches from. So you type in what you need, you get the slip, you have to pay for the slip and then go back and wait for your sandwich. And that's how he and I ran into each other. He had already moved on in his life, met a new woman, got married, and here we are, both of us are staying there waiting for our sandwiches. It was very strange, yeah. And I couldn't help but think, I'm on state parole for the next, 5+ years at the time. Any police interaction for me can get me sent right back upstate. So I was aware, look, whatever happens here, I need to be controlled. And I kind of clicked into my old mentality. I knew I was in a gas station. I knew there was a camera, so I knew I was on film. And he actually approached me and asked me, he said, look, I heard that there's a possibility you might want to talk. And I think by just autopilot default, I had just said no. And he had kind of read that from me. It was just like, okay. And, walked away. But then I had remembered, for a number of years, I was praying for this guy. As hard as it was for me to do, I hated him and I was still praying for him because I knew that would be the beginning. I knew God could lift that off of me eventually. And so I started to realize, look, this is the moment that he's given me for me to be a man and to be grown and to be accountable. So I went back to him and I had just said, look, if you want to talk, let's sit in my car and let's have a conversation. And that was the only thing that I could come up with where I felt like if he was trying to do something or try and set me up or get me in trouble, at least I would have on film that he was in my vehicle. So it's not something that I was, aggressing or anything like that. And it didn't go down like that. We sat in the car, we shut the doors, we looked at each other, we just said, okay, what's going on? And we had a quick conversation for a couple of minutes. We apologized to each other. We shook hands, we hugged, and we just said, we know we don't like each other. We know it's not going to be cool. We know we're not friends, but he has a child with my sister, and he's about to be 18 now. And we knew for the sake, at least for him, we would never want him to think, it was already a rough situation as it is. So, we agreed to say, if we ever see each other, it's not going to be a problem, but we're just living our two separate lives. Nothing needs to be friendly. And yeah, I've only seen him one time recently since. And yeah, we didn't even look at each other. So
it's amazing that you were able to do that, and also how powerful that you were praying for him as well. And I think that's just another nod to the fact that people can make mistakes but still be very good people. But how has being out of prison with a conviction for attempted murder impacted your life?
In the beginning, it was very rough. Now I would say I'm so immune to. It's my life now. So I mean, it's not a problem for me now. I encounter obstacles all the time, but they don't hurt like they did in the beginning. So yeah, there's plenty of judgment, plenty of things that I just can't do, unfortunately. I have problems passing background checks for renting apartments or hotels, or let's say things like that. It's quite a laundry list, I would say, of roadblocks. Obviously there's certain career paths I have problems getting loans from banks. But I mean, outside of that, to be honest, this is probably going to sound pretty strange, but there's days that I wake up that I can't even believe that period of my life even happened. It almost seems like I haven't done a day, certain days that, I feel so good about, where I'm at and what I'm working towards. So it's definitely a burden, but a tolerable one at this point, now that I feel like I'm so far away from it.
And I'm curious about the hotel thing. So are there certain hotels that you're not allowed to book into or something?
Like Airbnb, for example, I can't book any of those. Like, they just permanently deleted my account. Normal hotels, yeah, but like something like that, yeah, there's no way. They just, I guess, to have an account, they run a background check on you, and I'm just like permanently banned from it by default. So.
Wow. And that's where I think we need to change the narrative about convictions, because you've been out of prison for 9 years now, is that right?
Yeah, almost 10. Yeah.
And I mean, you're doing good in the world. You've learned from your mistakes. You're making a difference. It baffles me that you're still, prison is supposed to be the punishment, and then you get a second chance, but you're only really being given half a second chance if you're being prevented from really living your life like any other human being.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I wish, me personally, I do empathize with it. I understand, let's say if I'm moving into some community, I would understand if there would be some background check and they want to know. But, I'd wish there'd be some sort of secondary opportunity in terms of evaluation to, like for example, when I went to rent an apartment, I was denied right away, but I went to another place, and before I ran into the owner of the building, and I had said, look, this is what happened to me. I'm applying for your one of your units in your building. And I had actually had a speech on film where I was speaking at a college, and I had said, look, can I send you this link and maybe just watch 2 minutes of it if you can? And he watched the whole hour and like texted me back later and said, dude, that was awesome. Like, don't worry, you're in, we'd be happy to have you as a resident. So I kind of just wish there was an extra layer of something that people would be willing to do instead of just the roadblock, because some people you're not going to want, which is understandable, but give them that chance to have some sort of evaluation before you just block them all the way.
Yeah, completely agree. So what would you say the biggest lessons you've learned from your entire experiences, from the drug dealing to the prison to shooting to actually being in prison? What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned?
I think one of the biggest is that most of the things you think are important as you're growing up don't mean a damn thing. And I think, being fortunate enough to get through a career and build a career, and I feel like I make, good money, and I'm able to do a lot of great things. I'm traveling the world. I have a great support system, a great circle of friends. And I just, it's really, for me, just the simple things are the most important. And we have those things. Most of us have them early on and separate ourselves from it. So, family, love, good relationships, those are, no matter how successful or anything I achieve, like, it's incomparable to those things. And I think people should realize early on how important it is to stick to those things and as valuable, instead of materialistic or a status or things like that, because the people that follow you or that look up to you for that they don't really care about you. And I would just say, that life is kind of like, if you picture a river that flows downstream, it's so easy to get carried by that current and get into that well of negativity. And in my opinion, very few can make that swim upstream. So it's very easy to get your heart hardened, but very difficult to make that swim and get it back to compassionate again. So I would say be very careful with which way you're swimming in that river.
That's amazing, Joshua. What a great way to end the podcast. I'm going to pop a link to your social media in the show notes because you're very inspiring. You post very inspiring things on social media, really getting people thinking about personal development and growth. So I'll pop a link there. And I'm just so grateful our paths have crossed because the work you are doing is incredible. From the minute we met, I could just tell that you are such a genuine soul. And I know that you'll add a lot of value to the listeners. So I'm really grateful to you.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for you as well. You have that same energy. So I'm very happy for the opportunity.